Okay, my book that I've just finished, The Courage to Be Disliked by Ichiro Kishimi and Fumitake Koga. It's an international bestseller that's sold 5 million copies. I'd never heard of this, but apparently it's super popular in Asia. It was published in 2013 in Japan and in New Zealand 2017. What this book is it's an overview of individual psychology, taken basically from a psychologist named Alfred Adler. Before I'd read this, I had no idea who Alfred Adler was. He was in the Vienna School, I believe it's Vienna Circle, maybe, and he was a colleague of Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung. So I've heard of Jung and Freud, but I'd never heard of Adler, and maybe that's just because I came from a university that was sort of postmodern, whatever you want to say, sort of mindset. So I found this really interesting, and I feel like Adler combines so many interesting schools of thought, like Nietzschean philosophy, Stoicism, work from like Plato and Socrates. There's lots of really cool things in here, and I had about 10 bookmarks in here, and I've just reduced it down to 4 things, and hopefully it doesn't take too long to read. So the first one is like basically a discussion of what it is. In Adlerian psychology, trauma is definitively denied. This was a very new and revolutionary point. Certainly, the Freudian view of trauma is fascinating. Freud's idea is that a person's psychic wounds, traumas, cause his or her present unhappiness. When you treat a person's life as a vast narrative, there is an easily understandable causality and sense of dramatic development that creates strong impressions and is extremely attractive. But Adler, in denial of the trauma argument, states the following. No experience is in itself a cause of our success or failure. We do not suffer from the shock of our experiences, the so-called trauma, but we instead make out of them what suits our purpose. We are not determined by our experiences, but the meaning we give them is self-determining. So really interesting. Don't say that an event has caused us to behave in a way. Rather, the way that we behave has been caused by event. It's quite interesting. When we refer to the pursuit of superiority, there's a tendency to think of it as the desire to try to be superior to other people, as the desire to climb higher, even if it means kicking others down. You know, the image of ascending a stairwell and pushing people out of the way to get to the top. Adler does not uphold such attitudes, of course. Rather, he's saying that on the same level playing field, there are people who are moving forward and there are people who are moving forward behind them. Keep that image in mind. Though the distance covered and the speed of walking differ, everyone is walking equally in the same flat place. The pursuit of superiority is the mindset of taking a single step forward on one's own feet, not the mindset of competition of the sort that necessitates aiming to be greater than other people. A couple more. Ooh, this is going to be a long video. So it's an awesome book though. No, I don't want to write that one. This is a few from the very end. For a human being, the greatest unhappiness is not being able to like oneself. Adler came up with an extremely simple answer to address this reality, namely, that the feeling of I am beneficial to the community or I am of use to someone is the only thing that can give one a true awareness that one has worth. Youth. Do you mean the contribution of others you mentioned earlier? Philosopher. Yes. And this is an important point. When we speak of contribution to others, it doesn't matter if the contribution is not a visible one. Youth. It doesn't matter if the contribution is a visible one. Philosopher. You are not the one who decides if your contributions are of use. That is the task of other people, and is not an issue in which you can intervene. In principle, there is not even any way you can know whether or not you have really made a contribution. That is to say, when we are engaging in this contribution to others, the contribution does not have to be a visible one. All we need is a subjective sense that I am of use to someone, or in other words, a feeling of contribution. Youth. Wait a minute. If that's the case, then what you are calling happiness is? Philosopher. Do you see it now? In a word, happiness is the feeling of contribution. That is the definition of happiness. Finally, the last line. Philosopher. I give you the words of Adler. Someone has to start. Other people might not be cooperative, but that is not connected to you. My advice is this. You should start, with no regard to whether others are cooperative or not. Super cool book. If you're interested in alternative psychological principles or a life philosophy, it's individual psychology is what Adler's psychology is called, philosophy of life. So check it out if you're interested. It's pretty awesome.